Let's get started. Okay. So we have one name on the public comment, but she's not here yet. So if she does arrive, we will try and find some space to accommodate that. So moving on to the review of the items. So in front of each board member is a list, and I've got to start by thanking Shannon Moody, Rachel Edmond. You guys have just so many hours and so much time making this look so much better than I possibly could have. Thank you very much. And then we have them broken down into 6 different categories. We're going to talk about each category individually and make notes that we would like for them to review and see if we want to change wording anywhere or if there's something that we feel doesn't go far enough in our advocacy. Just a little bit about what this is. So this will be our legislative advocacy sheet. This committee tonight will will leave here with a final draft document to be written up and presented to the board at Thursday's meeting for an official vote. Once ratified by the board, this will be the official document that the school board members and anyone advocating for Hamilton County Schools is pressed to use as a reference to our legislatures, both in the state of Tennessee and beyond, if anyone has any questions about it. These are really great tools. I spent a long time in sales, and the tactics of getting what you want done in front of both your elected officials and in a sales call is good to have a leave behind notes, concise notes, so it's an easy follow through. Once we have had this conversation, we will compile the conversation pieces and make sure that we have those written down. So there's a little bit more in depth about each number, but this is the biggest part of it. So to begin with, the first one is Tennessee state policy on school letter grades. And I'll read the items here. So we have the Hamilton County Board of Education encourages the General Assembly to amend TCA 491228 to give schools a 1 to 5 score instead of an A through F letter grade and require that the scoring formula be approved by the TSBA. We urge the General Assembly to require that Tennessee Department of Education equally balance the weight of student achievement and growth indicators and to balance target to absolute measures in the achievement subscore. So my notes on this, and part of the reason that I wanted it in here, a school can be performing excellently, but simply not absolutely perfect and still have a B and even a C grade. Using this system is great if you're taking a math quiz, but it doesn't truly show the value and the dedication of a school when you've got an absolute letter grade attached there. That's the biggest part to it. Also, getting approval through the Tennessee School Board Association is someone that works with us hand in hand, and so they have a better grasp of being able to help and figure out the correct way to properly score schools. That's my initial thoughts on it, and I'll open that item up. Oh, yes, sorry, Shannon, go ahead.
I just want to make a quick statement that probably shouldn't have read TSBA as I'm reading back through it. We probably want to advocate that it go to the Tennessee State Board of Education. I don't think the TSBA would approve anything like that from a state perspective, but the Board of Education would. But currently in the law, it doesn't seek approval for A through F grades. It just says they have to share it with them. So sorry, that was our bad by putting the wrong acronym.
Anyone? Nope. Oh, go ahead. Ms. Black.
I just had a question that we're recommending the 1 through 5 score and weighting the growth versus achievement. How is that different from what we do now?
Currently, it's a through F, and the big difference between what they're doing now and in the past is the achievement measures based on absolute achievement, meaning there's no consideration of what we used to call AMOs or annual measurable objectives of setting a target score for a school. So right now, for example, if you don't get to 60%, you're not going to get think 60% is the A, right?
I meant like the level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5 schools.
Well,
How
right
is-
now they're calculated A through F.
You're thinking about TVAS.
I am thinking
You're
about
not
it.
thinking about
Okay.
overall.
This has a lot to do with the scatter points that we've been talking about and how the achievement and success rates didn't look well. The presentation, forgive me, what month was that? Was that in October?
I think it was in October.
Okay.
Yeah. This first indicator is really pointing towards additional sort of cooperation and collaboration in agreeing to what it means, because throughout this listening process, a lot of the recommendations, both by the TSBE and by districts and members of the community, weren't utilized in the formation of the final formula. So this kind of says we think more people should be a part of making those final decisions.
And what are the growth versus achievement percentages right now?
Under the new accountability system. So it's different in secondary and elementary, but Shannon, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in the secondary space, achievement is sitting at 50%, growth is sitting at 40%, and there's 10% for other, and I don't know that all those indicators are determined. And then in elementary, it's slightly different.
Elementary is 50, 40, and 10, with 10 being the lowest 25%. I think secondary, without looking at it, I think is 50, 30, 10, and 10 with the lowest 25%, and then a college and career readiness measure. I can verify that to be sure, but I actually think it's only like 30% at, yeah.
So the difference in the accountability system that we're moving from and to, achievement has moved up in terms of the percent weight, and how it's measured has changed. So that's huge. And then the other indicators have changed and decreased in that. And then also the other big thing that's missing from the accountability system, or has changed in the accountability system, is that you used to be accountable for student groups against the whole, and now they're bundled in that lower 25%. And so you're not looking at, the accountability system doesn't look at each and every group of kiddos and how they're doing in terms of growth and achievement.
Why shouldn't they be bumped? What's the argument that they make that they shouldn't all be bumped? I mean, everybody treats the same.
Why should they not be
Why they
bundled?
yeah.
So I think I think my opinion is, like, when you go back, let's give it 20 years to NCLB, or 18 years, whatever it's been to NCLB, what came out of that policy was that we would no longer allow schools to have an overall grade that hid the fact that some kiddos in the schools weren't doing well. So we were looking at a whole as opposed to an aggregate. I think from a school system perspective and from a school leader perspective, if our school system has some students that are really excelling, but we have other groups of kids that aren't, we should be held accountable to be creating the learning conditions and opportunities for the kids that have yet to succeed, to ensure that we're moving every student towards growth and mastery. And so when you stop looking at the student groups uniquely, you can't be as targeted in your interventions and supports for the learning needs of those kids.
We used to. When did this change? When did we go to the
Student
to the A?
groups? Oh, A to F?
Yeah.
Right now.
It's been, so this past year, this is the first year.
It
They
hasn't
haven't
been
come out
published yet.
They should come out in January.
Okay. So this is new legislation that they.
It's not necessarily new legislation. Legislation occurred in 2017. Tennessee Department of Education went through a listening session, did a lot of work, and in 2018 there was a methodology that was released that we've been working from since 2018. That, again, the achievement measure included absolute, but it also included AMOs. You saw presentations on this years ago.
Yep.
If you remember, we first started talking about Ready Graduate. Ready Graduate was a high school indicator. Gary, I see you nodding your head. You remember when that happened. So legislation has been around since 2017, 2018. We saw the methodology. It's never actually been run to give letter grades to schools. Number of reasons why, some of them real, some of them not real. But the state has never actually calculated letter grades for schools.
I will say, like in 2018, and and Shannon, you can speak to this, but 2018, they did have a 0 to 4 number against every single school. So you could go to the TDOE site and you could see a number for a school. It just didn't correlate to a letter grade, and it wasn't publicly, published, so to speak, to make determinations about quality.
I think what I want to understand is why they went to this system. What was their rationale in going to the A to F system? That's not the right answer. Let me ask.
I can tell you what
Shannon knows.
I can tell you what I think, but it's speculative. I mean, you're talking about, a General Assembly that passed legislation in 2017, and we had a system in place. So the methodology changed without any action from the Legislative Assembly, without any action from the Tennessee School Board. So essentially, the Commissioner of Education changed the methodology. No, it's never been approved by the legislator. It's never been approved by Tennessee School Board. She came in this fall and decided to change it, and so it's hard to say why it was decided to change, because we haven't seen any action from the Legislative Assembly that's different from 2017.
So that one person, the Commissioner of Education, made that decision, and obviously you can't get in her head to tell me why, but
I can tell you the conversations I had with her. I mean, when she came to Chattanooga and it was one of the first listening sessions that we had, it was very clear. We were there. There was a delegation from Cleveland, City Schools that was there as well. And just bluntly, I mean, she asked me, do you think that a school that has 80% proficient and a school that has, I think she said 35% proficient, should get the same letter grade? And my reaction or my response to her was, tell me what they were at last year. So if the school at 80% went from 90% to 80%, and the school at 35 went from 25 to 35, then yeah, I think they probably should. I mean, one of them clearly did a better job. So just saying absolute achievement should be the one indicator of what we mean by achievement. I don't think the General Assembly meant that, nor do I think the Tennessee School Board meant it.
Let me add one thing. I think that General Assembly way back said it was to convey to the public some information around quality. We don't have a problem with that idea. What we have a problem with is the way the A to F is being calculated. We don't think is actually conveying to the public what the school impact on learning is. So being transparent with the public around school quality isn't the issue. It's that what's going into the soup to generate the letter grade is the problem. And under the old methodology, if they had maintained the methodology as is, and then we think 1 to 5 is better than A to F just because of the way people understand it, but that old methodology we actually affirm. Like, we think that combination of variables would provide a good metric for schools and transparency to the public. But instead, what has happened is they changed that methodology, and in doing so, we think are going to communicate to the public something that we don't hold to be true about schools or about what makes high-quality learning and improvement.
Mr. Key.
Yeah. The problem I have with it, years ago, we went from A to F grades for kids to number grades, because number grades, so a kid that's an A, could be, and at that time it was 94 for an A, or they could be 98 for an A. And there's a difference in a 94 and a 98. And there's also a difference in a 94 and a 102, which until the year 2002 or 2003, we went all the way up to 105. And then we cut it back down. Yep, you could get up to 105. And then we cut it back down and gave no grade higher than a 100. Somewhere around, I was at Hunter Middle School at the time, so somewhere between 2004 and 2008. And they went with that using the reasoning that the state went with that was because then it showed more accurate competition toward colleges accepting those students on a kid that had an overall grade point average of a 98 and another student that had an overall grade point average of a 99, or or a 92.5, or, I'm just saying, and I didn't realize one person made this decision. I thought, I hate to say it, but after they came out with the, grade 3, let's, if they can't pass the test, let's hold them back. I thought they turned around and made another great move by doing the letter grades, which, to me, the number, so you can do a 4.7. You can score and get a 4.4. You can get a 4.1. That 4.1 shows me something more than an A or a B or So I just think that the reasoning that the legislature 20 years ago, 25 years ago, went from letter grades, or it might have even been before that, to number grades is the same reason we should be looking at doing this as a number and not a letter.
May I add a piece there? I think that, to your point, a lot of what people feel about grades, right? Everyone has kind of a little bit different impression about what a grade is and what it means and what it tells us about something, is why this proposal actually has the 1 to 5 stars, because I think that helps us tell a little bit of a better story too. What I think about a C may be different than what you think about a C and what you think about a C, and it has a wide range. Whereas if we're really talking about like a scale of performance for schools, we probably really are talking about some kind of meaningful 1 through 5 rating versus attaching it to a grade, which has a lot of different meaning to a lot of different people.
And how does the state grade our teachers?
Oh, teacher evaluation is done through a collection of things, actually.
Yes,
But
but
it's
what
also
is
1
the
to 5.
final grade given? It's given as a 1 through 5.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
So, we use the grading of our instructors as a number grade, not a letter grade. Why are we turning around and then changing it and using a letter grade instead of a number grade?
I think the other thing that we want to be thoughtful about is that right now the state is saying, we just want the public to know. But what we think is coming behind that is that there will be additional scrutiny, accountability, decisions made around schools that are F and D, so to speak. And those decisions likely will not align to our values.
And people probably are more comfortable with A through F than they are numbers, but as a previous administrator, numbers show more than letters, so.
Thank you. Mr. Perez.
I can't do a Marco impression. I think a lot of what we're talking about is the difference between what parents or grandparents or, custodial parents are used to in terms of a grade, and how we can make this more functional in terms of what Gary just said. We can compare, and Dr. Robinson, as you said, or Dr. Stewart, how do we determine what formula we're going to use? Is what data are we going to use in addition to TCAP scores? For example, in this right here, what is the difference between the weight of student achievement and growth? Is there any difference between that and target and absolute measures? Or are they the same?
No.
So I need to have the difference explained to me.
Yeah. Well, so when you talk about growth, talking about value added, right? And you've seen the analogy that Shannon uses all the time of a track, right? Years growth is, regardless of where you're on the track, did you make a full lap around it, right? Where achievement says you got to hit this mark. You got to run a 400 in 60 seconds or you don't make the mark, right? So there's a big difference between the two. I think the common, where we're kind of arguing is what does achievement mean, right? Is it absolute achievement or is it an objective that you set? So do you set, not even saying a year's growth, but do you say, if you make your loop, last year you made it in 65 seconds, we want you to make it in 60 seconds this year. We believe that should count as showing, improvement in achievement, and not just saying that 60 seconds is the goal. What we keep going back to, and I think we're trying to beat around the bush here, we shouldn't probably, is that absolute achievement is correlated, it's correlated to wealth, right? And it's not, we've shown you the graphs of where it shows our students living in poverty, across the country, across the state, not just in Hamilton County, but you can almost scatter plot them to where it shows a real correlation between poverty and achievement. And so what you're essentially going to be doing by saying absolute achievement is you're going to set a cut line and say schools that are above, that are above or don't have 20% poverty are going to score an A, right? The schools that have 20 to 40 are going to score a B, and so on. And that plays out across the state very clearly.
I think it,
Can I add one thing?
across the nation, probably.
Yeah.
The AMOs that he's talking about, that how much should a school grow in a year, the state set those before. So we didn't say, school A, you're currently at 22% overall success rate, and we made some arbitrary number. The state gave us, they said, we think this school, for it to grow in an accelerated intentional rate by next year has to be at whatever, 25.8, whatever the number is, and we set those targets, and we believe that there should be some accountability that a school get to that target, and there's an additional piece for doing double AMO. And Shannon could tell you, but the number of schools this year that made double AMO in the county is, 9, but the number of number of schools that made AMO is really high. In terms of they made what the state said is a reasonable amount of achievement growth, and that's the actual number of kids that hit the 60, to use this analogy. And the state set that for us. And so we think, well, great, you set that mark, we'll go after that mark. So let's look at it both ways, that absolute achievement, which was a method, or hitting the mark that you set for us. We think that we should still use that. And this commissioner took that off the table and said, we're not gonna use that anymore.
Okay, so that leads me to a question I've wanted to ask for several months now, is we have a school, an elementary school, for example, that the TVOS score was 3. And they're our best school in terms of third grade achievement. They're in the 70s. But there are 3. Who set, so you're telling me the state set their goal, or did the school set their goal, or the district?
No, on the state sets that, but again,
Okay.
thinking about the place you are on the track, I mean, essentially what you're saying is that school met the standard for growth. A 3 is actually meeting the standard, right? And so you would say that school actually did what it was expected to do in terms of growth, right? What we're arguing, right, is what you just said, is I know what school it is you're talking about, right? It's one of our wealthier schools.
Yes.
Right, and that's why it has 70%. What we believe is a true indicator of a really strong academic year, which they actually, that's a strong academic year, is that you see growth and achievement, right?
What we don't want is a school that's 70%, achievement and a growth level of 2 or 1.
Yeah.
Because what that tells us is that while those kids are making their way around in terms of proficiency, they're actually losing ground by their comparative peers. The kids that are just like them around the state are learning faster than they are. We think the district should be held accountable for that. We want to say to parents, no, we expect all of our schools to be at a level 3. You should expect that your kid's gonna get a full year's growth, and that when we do that achievement score will continue to inch up. Those 3s, 4s, and 5s is what drives achievement up, and we should be held accountable to the rate of growth for every single kid across the continuum. We don't wanna see a deceleration at the top of the continuum in terms of the top of the proficiency continuum.
Well, of course, what we want to see, it's concerning when you start to kind of dig into the data and and the school with their underprivileged students are excelling more than the students at other schools who are also considered underprivileged or, poverty. That concerns me in terms of accountability when a school can be like a level 3 TVOS. Shannon, you and I have talked about this, and yet they're our best performing school, and their disadvantaged students are much better than those students at another school. And here's a school that their scores are 5, 6, 7 times what some of our other schools are.
But again, remember, a 3 is like, a 3 means they are where they are, right? That, like, they met the expectation,
expectations.
Which is a positive thing.
Well, that would be a C then, and people up there certainly wouldn't be happy with their school getting a C in
No,
TVOS.
I think that's the point. That's actually what you just said is exactly what we're saying in this, is that a 3 in this is not what I go to with the C. Like, I made plenty of C's, and a 3-star restaurant is better than my C was.
Well,
Three is
what
what you'll
what
put
I,
Review.
my opinion is,
You ain't never made a C.
I promise you, I'll go show you my 3rd grade report card.
I don't think
Third
you've ever
grade.
made a C.
Well, we
That's
need,
the
we,
one that said
he might,
talk
he
too
might need
much
to be
out of it.
retained.
Anyway,
Got a couple
You
of
might-
those.
what I don't
Retention.
want to see is subjective measurements going
Yeah,
into this.
agreed.
And if at any point in time, if we have subjective measurements going into this, then we've got a problem. Because somebody's definition, even of a word, might be different in a different district or county. So we almost have to use absolute measures, but we have to expand beyond TCAP. So we have to include benchmarks, or we have to include, even though I'm not a fan of TVOS, we have to include those types of things, because here we have a school in TVOS that's a 3, but boy, in terms of achievement, they're a 5.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying again is, we said this going back to the formula put out in 2018 for high school. It included ready graduates, graduation rate. Those are all indicators that we felt like were important that aren't included. in
Well,
this.
is it possible, Mr. Chair, for us to be a little bit more specific?
So
in
there,
this?
there is something, as I was talking about at the beginning, these are the bullet points. There will be details that go
Okay.
along with them. So every comment that you guys have made tonight, we're going to take and put together into a more detailed after the fact, which is actually leads me, well, actually, I'm sorry, let me let Ms. Black speak, and then,
Well, I have one more question. Dr. Stewart, do you think that our benchmark scores should be included and not just TCAPs?
No. The way we use benchmarks is to drive instruction. So the language that we use with our teachers and our educators is that it's a formative assessment to tell us where our kids are against a standard in time. And what we think benchmarks should do is drive what happens tomorrow in class and for the next few weeks in class. And it's kind of it's just a thermometer. How we doing? How we doing? What we do know is that the benchmarks, since this county started using benchmarks in 2018 or restarted with CASE, they're incredibly predictive, meaning what we usually see by benchmark 3, most of our schools are within about a point and a half proficiency based on those benchmarks. So when we see a school that's growing in benchmarks, and we actually measure growth as well on those benchmarks, we use micro. When we see a school growing, that does usually translate into increased proficiency on the TCAP. So it's just an indicator over time. We don't think it should go in this kind of thing. We think it should drive what we do on the ground, such that at the end we would see a growth in achievement if we're responsive to the data in the way that we think we should be.
Do we have any data that since 2018 of educators moving from one school to another school and seeing a difference in growth a decrease in growth at one school and the increase in growth at another?
So educators that are tested in tested fields, that level of effectiveness score includes TVAS. That's something every educator, if you're in a tested field, you get your own growth, and then if you're not in a tested field, you get the school's growth for a percentage of your level of effectiveness. So you could see a teacher at school A, let's make them a sixth grade math teacher at school A, might have gotten their own growth score of whatever it is, and go to another school, and they'll still be measured against, to use the track, how their kids did against the track in whichever place they are.
Well, from my experience teaching in high school science, for 3 or 4 years, I could predict the grades pretty much of students from one of middle schools or the other. And then after about 3 or 4 years, it totally flipped. And when I did the research on it, one year the school district gave me all the data to do any research I wanted over the summer. You know how it can be. And what happened is that we had some teachers from one middle school move to another, but we had a whole bunch of retirements at the school that had been performing well, and they had all been replaced by pretty much transferees or brand new teachers. And so their level of success and achievement actually went down, while the other school, the teachers got more experience in those 3 or 4 years, and there was a better achievement rate. So it was really interesting to look at that data, and I've just wondered if we've looked at that in terms of teacher retirement and how many new teachers are in the school, especially with some of the turnover we get at some
Yeah,
schools.
we do. We look at level of effectiveness
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair,
a lot,
for indulging.
yeah.
Ms. Black?
I'm glad to hear that there's like something more specific than just these bullet points, because I am very concerned about the bundling of subgroups and not continuing to measure and separate out certain at-risk, groups of students, because we don't know what we don't measure.
That's right.
And that's very scary for me. I mean, as a social worker, like, it's really scary to think that we would create a system where it would be easier for kids who are at risk to fall through the cracks. That's what's concerning to me about, like, yes, letter grades can come with emotions and all that stuff. I do think using a number is better than a letter grade, but I don't want to get stuck on that when the meat and potatoes is that I don't want to create a system that evaluates our schools and our students that allows kids who are already at risk to fall through the cracks easier, because we're not measuring their achievement and we're not accountable to them.
Okay, so that being said, with the comments on there, obviously we have already noted one change, making that say Tennessee Department of Education. Is there any other verbiage in these 2 points that the board would like to have considered for changing it?
Well, I would like us to be more strongly worded, that this is going to the commissioner.
This is going to the
In terms-
Tennessee General Assembly.
Or them in terms of the 1 through 5 scored or letter grades. I think we're being rather bland.
So one last question, if I could. What's your feelings about it? Do you feel, are you okay with the letter grades, or are you more in favor of the number grades? Or?
I'm not opposed to going back to 2018 and using the methodology in 2018. I think that there are a lot of ironies in timing for this, and timing of some other things that are a concerted effort to continue to attack public education in Tennessee.
So help me out, because I'm not sure which one that are you.
I don't, like, I mean, if you look at our fifth thing here, I don't think that it is, I don't think it's a coincidence that the year that we finally decide to publish letter grades for public schools is the same year that we're gonna push through a school voucher program statewide, when we have zero evidence to support its effectiveness. In fact, the only data that we have coming out of school voucher program that initially started in Shelby County and Metro Nashville is that the students in that program actually underperform their peers in Metro Nashville and Shelby County. And so I just don't think it's a coincidence that we have this coinciding with the pressing for school vouchers. And I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist or pessimist, but I've just seen too much over the last 2 years to lead me to believe that these two are not related.
Are you
Ms. Black.
saying that creating emotions around letter grades could be intentional? Yeah.
Yes.
I get it. Yeah, no, I
I'm
tend
not-
to agree with
I'm
you.
not trying to be vague,
Yeah.
but this is not
Yeah.
my legislative agenda. And
Yeah.
so there will be times and places where I say what I think.
Sure.
And you guys may get mad at me, but this is not my legislative agenda.
Yeah.
This has to be an agenda that you guys are good with. And so I don't want you to feel like I'm trying to avoid saying it. I've said it a lot and I will continue to say it. My thought though is that, yes, this is very much connected.
Yes, okay. Yeah.
Well, we want change on methodology, and so to Groan's point, maybe this second bullet needs to be more specific, because we are pointing to methodology here and saying we think the methodology should be changed, because we would not be as opposed to A to F or 1 to 5 at all if the methodology was aligned to what we think actually moves schools.
Right. So maybe we should say that.
Yeah.
Maybe we just say that in our, what we want our agenda to be. We just say just that. If you wanna use A to F, go ahead, use it, but here's the way we want you to figure that A to F.
Right.
I think that would probably carry more weight than to say, no, I'll use 1 through 5.
Right. Because they're not gonna change their mind.
They're right, that's right.
So, again, I mentioned at the beginning, Shannon and Rachel have been the ones that have put together my thoughts and what I had on this, and are amazing. So I see Shannon nodding, so she's going to add that to the second one, and in the revised version that we get before Thursday, we will be, this, and again, Mr. Chair of our regular board, this will have to be added in after the fact, but it will be added in, and you guys will have a copy of this, that whatever we've changed before that vote.
If I may, make a suggestion, and Justin Dr. Robertson just referenced this first policy and the fifth being so closely kind of correlated there. Can maybe we jump down and discuss 5?
I know, because you got to go. Yeah. All right. If we're good with that, and we're good with, Shannon's going to rewrite this to the way that we just spoke about. We'll jump to 5 and then back to 2. And at the halfway point, we'll take the public comment that we missed out on in the beginning. And so let's go ahead. If we're good, is there any more discussion on number 1? Okay, we'll move on to 5. So I'll read it, and then you want to try something a little different, Shannon? Do you want to say your points to this first, or do you want me to no, okay. All right, Tennessee's state policy on school vouchers. Hamilton County Board of Education urges the General Assembly to place stronger household income parameters on access to state-funded private school and homeschool vouchers to limit the ability of affluent families to use taxpayer education dollars towards such programs. Apply public education state accountability requirements, including TCAP and TN Ready standards, school letter grades, and TVOS composite scores to private institutions and homeschool programs accepting vouchers, and make the results publicly available to help families make informed decisions about the best education for their children. So, again, there will be more notes and context, but to put a few of them in here, the first thing is that both homeschool and private education groups don't have to use the exact same standards that we do. They actually only use like 3 of 5 in our testing methods. There's a couple of other shortcomings there, but one big note, two big notes that I wanted to make. I think that in Hamilton County, to begin with, we do a great job with school choice. We have the ability for a child and their family to find the school that's right for them and go to that school without us taking our taxpayer dollars out of our public education. The second thing is that the voucher program actually goes above the TISA funding model. So at current, TISA funds a child at $6,860. The voucher bill is around $7,075. So we have over $100 per child of taxpayer money that we're just flat losing out on. I said, yeah, 860, yeah. We've got every single one of those children, we're paying extra on top of it. And we're losing money, and then we're also paying extra money to give away to someone else that's not our public schools. I'll open the floor up for any comments.
Okay. The second paragraph here, I totally agree with. They ought to be held to the same level of accountability. The first paragraph I struggle with, and probably one of the very few areas that you and I have disagreed over the years. Yeah, I think there's been much ado about this voucher program that affects so few people. This first year, as I understand it, it's 5,000 students statewide. Is that right?
10,000.
10,000 statewide. So from a percentage standpoint, what does that represent across the state?
You ask me hard questions.
In dollar amount, it represents $141.5 million.
I'm not, that's not my question. Then in percentage of number of students.
I
I think we're just over 1 million
Yeah,
students
I'd
this
say
year.
that it's
So
less than 5%.
Yeah.
Okay, less than 5%. So
it's a
not a
million, it's
tremendous impact. That's a question.
From a percentage standpoint, no, I don't think that it is, but I think that, again, where you and I would say that we maybe haven't come to terms with it, I think is a really important point is, who is eligible, what income makes someone eligible, because again, we've talked about this quite a bit of saying that it's intended for low-income students that are zoned for schools that have historically struggled. That actually is not the case. I mean, we're talking about right now in Shelby, Metro, Hamilton County, it's any kid zoned for any school in those counties, right? And so
Yeah.
there's some deception there about who actually is able to take advantage of this. And then what my bigger current concern is moving forward is, and again, they have put a lot of parameters out intentionally, I believe, trying to get support before you put out the specifics. But they're gonna open it up to anyone, right? Not just families that are living in poverty, but anyone of any income level, not just someone zoned to a school that's failing, but anyone that is zoned to any Tennessee school, not just someone that went to school and they didn't get served well, but any student. They could be in private schools or homeschooled for the past 7 years and now all of a sudden be eligible for a voucher. So it's those things that, again, like, we need to see details to be able to talk about.
What?
Hey, do you mind?
Go
We're
ahead.
having fun being fact checkers over here. So the first year proposal right now for 24-25 would be 10,000 students who are low income, 10,000 students of any eligibility. So it's a total of 20,000 in the proposal for the first year. Second year, so 25-26, no limit, universal, anybody, any number of kids.
All right, now, it says here, the ability of affluent families. Now, I know what affluent means, but give me a number.
It's
What does that
300,
mean?
right now it's written it's 300% of poverty. 200, the proposal's 300.
Okay.
Got our fact checkers back in.
So are the tax dollars to the affluent guy, are they any more valuable than the poor man's tax dollars? What's the difference?
Well,
I heard, somebody said a while ago, we're taking taxpayers' money. Well, if it's my child, it's my money, right? Yes?
No, I would disagree with you because we don't have, like, publicly, we do not have there's no constitutional requirement for us to provide a private education. There's a constitutional requirement for us to provide a high-quality public education, right? And so I think that's where the difference is. And I mean, we can talk about income level, but ultimately, in my opinion, that's what it falls into, is what is the constitutional requirement of Tennessee and Hamilton County? It's to provide a high-quality public education.
I guess where my rub is we, I know we've worked very hard, we're essentially an open enrollment district.
That's right.
We are, we just are.
Yep.
You know, So if we're telling somebody that you can't use your tax dollars that you paid in to go to a private Christian school, if that's what you want to do, then all of a sudden, we're taking that open enrollment away from that person that wants to send his or her child to maybe a private Christian school. That's where my struggle is. And what does affluent mean? And, again, in terms of numbers,
Yeah, I mean, I think that when you're talking about someone that's 300% above the poverty level, you're talking someone that's making almost $100,000.
I'm going to come to Ms.
This
Black.
one's gonna
but
be hard.
I do want to say one more time that another thing that I mentioned is that there's a disparity in the amounts. So we would be losing around $100 per child extra because we're paying more than we're getting for that child. So that is another loss of income.
So with that, I think if I understood Shannon right, let's assume for a minute, Shannon, you said 10 and 10?
Yes.
All right, so let's just pretend for a minute that we lose, that's statewide, right?
20,000.
For 1 year, and then no limit.
Okay, so how many took advantage of this program in Davidson County, for example? No idea, or Shelby County?
The numbers vary. It really depends on who you ask.
Well, I'm asking you.
The-
I'm
yeah.
gonna ask you.
So I've heard numbers ranging from 330 to just under 2,000.
Okay, so if we lose, let's get in the middle, we lose 700 students in Hamilton County. So what does that cost us? What'd you say, being $100 per child?
No.
No.
It's $7,075, but it's $100 more than we even brought in.
Okay, but that TVOS money, again, is taxpayer money, it's their money.
So that's 4.9.
But that's like saying, it's equivalent of saying, because I want to build a private road on, property that automatically should require Hamilton County government to maintain that private road, because my tax dollars go to the public roads that are required. But if I buy a piece of property that's 20 acres and we all want to go build houses on it, put a private road, that shouldn't mean that public dollars should go to support your private road for your house. I think that's a fair analogy, right? I mean,
All right, it's apples to oranges, stuff like that.
okay.
Where I would push us on this is the tension, and I say this a lot, is the tension between individual liberty and common good. So your argument is, as individuals, we should be able to make the choices we want to make for our kids. And I would ask us as a public school system, what is our responsibility to the common good, to the whole? And when is it that individual liberties should usurp our commitment to the whole? And this right here, to me, is that tension. And I think for me as a public school educator, I sit here and I say our responsibility, my responsibility, and I would contend the collective responsibility is to the common good. What is it? And by removing these dollars from the pot, so to speak, it has a negative effect on the whole, even though your argument is like, individually, I should be able to choose that. And I think that's the tension. Where does that choice live on a continuum?
I don't think I would disagree with that at all. And that is a contention. I think we gotta be real careful here, or we're removing some of the choice. That's my point, is, I just think that the taxpayer ought to be able to make that choice.
So if someone do we take $7,000 out of the taxes that I paid this past year? How do we determine what my individual tax contribution is or was, and what percentage of that actually gets pulled out? Like, does that mean that I could get $7,000 to do home improvements that are energy efficient?
No, education.
Right, but I'm saying we don't have a constitutional constitutional requirement. We are constitutionally obligated to provide a high-quality public education, not to provide a high-quality education. And we could go, I mean, we go really deep here as well. Like, we're not even allowed, like you want to say, I want my kid to go to a Christian school, publicly, we're not even allowed to offer a Christian school. So we're fighting this tension, right, of what we're publicly required to offer and saying that it's taxpayers' dollars because number one, we don't have a state income tax, so it's hard to tie what does that 7,000 of taxpayer dollars go back to, right? I mean, can we show that all these families have paid $7,000 in sales tax? There's a lot of things that go into this, but ultimately what it rests on is what is the constitutional requirement of Hamilton County and the state of Tennessee to provide a high-quality public education.
But apparently, the General Assembly looks at it differently than what you just said.
Well, the General Assembly hasn't decided yet, right? And what 6 other states have said is when this tried to go through is that it's actually not allowable, right? And so they're having these same arguments across the country about whether or not we can do this. So the General Assembly hasn't voted, and in 2019, or I think it was 19 when this originally passed, it passed by 1 vote, and they held the voting session open for almost an hour. And now that's actually being contested. So there's a lot to be questioned about whether or not this is allowable or not.
All right, well, I don't want to get into the weeds here because I'm the one that wants to leave early, but, so tell me why the first policy we discussed and this policy, you said a minute ago, I think I heard you say, these two ironically,
So I'm speaking on my personal behalf. I'm not speaking as a representative of you or this county. I just don't think that it is a coincidence that a law that's been on the books since 2017 to give letter grades to schools has never been followed through with. And people will say, well, it's because of testing issues or COVID issues. That accounts for about 3 of the years that we failed to give letter grades. Now, all of a sudden, the same year that we're wanting to pass statewide vouchers, we're wanting to assign letter grades to every public school. Because what letter grades are going to do is it's going to rouse emotion among people that says, my school got a C, right? Or my school got a B and I think it should, be an A, whatever. But it's going to arouse a lot of emotion among the public to then point back trying to say that public schools are not serving our kids well, right? Which, again, there's no evidence to suggest private schools are going to serve our kids any better. In fact, the only evidence that exists is saying that they did not serve our kids any better than the public schools. And so I just don't think that that it is a coincidence that all of a sudden we're adamant we've got to give letter grades, and we also want to push this voucher system to support kids. There was spokesman for the state that came out earlier, and it was asked at this meeting, are you going to hold private schools accountable, right? What accountability measures will be there? And the response from that individual was, we believe that parents should hold schools accountable. That's great. If we want to do that with public schools too, right? Because most of our parents, like at their school across the nation, shows you that parents are satisfied with their school. They're not satisfied with me and you, right? They don't like the system, but their individual school, when you take polls, shows that they're satisfied. And so you're going to see higher satisfaction rates than you are scores on TCAP across the country, or across the state and then across the country. And so if that's what our measure is saying how our parents feel about their individual schools, great, let's do that for every public school then. But again, when you said my roads analogy is apple to oranges, I think we're playing apples to oranges here, right? If we want to set a level playing field with private schools, that's great, but I just don't think that that's there, and I don't think it's a coincidence that this came out and it's being followed through with at the exact same time that we're trying to push vouchers. And again, that's me. That's-
I hear you, I hear you. Well, this is a tough one for me. Thank you there, Mr. Chairman. I don't mean to monopolize here.
I would note the part of it that you like. Also, don't forget that it doesn't say where that money has to be spent at both the private schools or the home schools. Obviously, you would assume tuition, but it's not so far as to think that they couldn't do a home improvement to a house to better educate their children. So your energy efficient windows could go in a school use. Ms. Black, I have next.
I'm trying, from what I understand, the current draft of the broad statewide voucher program is a little bit different from the pilot program that exists now. There are more stringent income requirements on the pilot program that exists now than would be in the bill. So the way I understand it, and what makes sense to me, knowing like what some of private schools cost, is that there are very few families that meet the income requirements right now that can pay the difference between the voucher and the rest of the private school tuition, which could account for how low the numbers of participation are now. If we remove all of those income requirements, there's no limit to how many families could take that off-ramp from public education to private education. And I'm just going to be really honest. I find it incredibly infuriating that the same government legislative body at the state of Tennessee that's funded public education 49th in the nation now wants to, for the last however many 20, 30 years, now wants to sit here and say, you're not doing good enough. We're going to go over here and allow families to take public dollars to private schools, and we're not going to have any accountability whatsoever for these private schools.
I want to be clear because I think we've got to talk very specifically here. Again, remember, the legislator has not done anything with this.
Oh, I
right?
understand.
And so,
This is what they're looking at.
I know, but when you're
Right.
saying the legislature, you guys get accused of doing a lot of things that you haven't done. And so I want to be clear, like, this is a proposal that's coming out of the governor's office that the legislator has taken zero action on.
Right.
And so, just to be clear.
Yes. There is a lot of support. And there's a lot of folks who are talking about that they've been advocating for and pushing for a statewide voucher program. And I tend to agree that, we have to be as a governmental body and as public educators and as the body that's supposed to be supporting public education, that we have to look at the common good. And I can't see how providing basically a funnel from the public education funding to private schools with no accountability on achievement could be good for the majority of students in the state of Tennessee. I just don't see how that's good for that benefits the common good at all. But I do think that the change in the income requirements from the pilot program to what's being proposed could drastically affect the number of students that participate in the program. And I think we have to be very careful about that when we're thinking about a statewide voucher program, that the pilot program had very specific income requirements that kept the numbers of kids or families who participated fairly contained to people who needed the assistance in paying for private school. And when you remove those income requirements, you're basically saying that the state is going to subsidize families who can already afford and are already paying for private school, that they're going to get basically a check from the state to subsidize that. And that the change in those income requirements could drastically affect the numbers of families that participate in a voucher program from what we've seen from the pilot program.
What's the income requirement under this pilot program, do you know?
For the first 10,000, it's 300% of the poverty, and for the next 10,000, there is no income requirement.
The way it sounds under the pilot.
No,
No, I'm sorry, the current pilot is, 200%.
Yeah.
Next year, 300.
Around $70,000. 300% is about $105,000.
And the proposal takes that out, though. The proposed legislation takes that completely out.
The pilot program also said that you couldn't qualify for vouchers if you already went to a private school, that you could only qualify for the vouchers under this pilot program that we've been operating on the last few years. You could only qualify for the vouchers if you weren't already using private schools. That limitation is not in what's being proposed now, which also means that people who are already paying for private schools, people who have already stepped away from public education, can now basically get be subsidized by the state for that tuition that they're already paying.
Also, in the original design, the students that were eligible had to be zoned to quote-unquote failing schools as identified by the state of Tennessee, which were the priority, the lowest performing schools, and creating an actual mechanism to move those kids towards a quote-unquote better school, and that's taken away as well.
And did it say failing? Because I heard at one time they worded it poorly performing, which I thought was very, so it was
So it could go to the D.
failing
I think
school.
originally, in its original design, you had to be identified in that bottom 5%. Now, that's
Okay.
changed and been tweaked a little bit, but again, the original thing was to create this option for children who are contained in a space that they potentially, have no options, and actually create an authentic option.
I just wanted to make very clear that what the governor is proposing as a statewide voucher program is significantly different from the pilot program that we've been dealing with. And I don't know that the public understands that. And that the pilot program has been very limited, very intentionally, for specific students and specific families. And the current bill that's being proposed, or what's being sent from the governor's office to the General Assembly, is very, very different from the pilot program of the vouchers that we dealt with in Hamilton County, in Nashville, in Shelby County.
And I think to go even further than that, we don't know what the bill is that's being sent. What is being talked about through the governor's office is very different than the current, but there's actually nothing that is in writing that would allow us to examine it and know the impact that it would or would not have.
So all we're simply saying here then is, to your point, is that we want the General Assembly to well, it spells it out, place stronger household income. So if we're saying all this, if they do that, let's pretend for a minute they do that, and then they also hold the private schools to the same accountability, can we live with vouchers then? Another question.
You may be able to, not, I can't. I mean, and I think that, I think that's, what, where Mr. Groen was saying earlier, if it was up to him, he would make the language stronger. I would make this language a whole lot stronger if it was only my decision. And honestly, this is one, I may not be able to be quiet on and stay in line with this, and I'll tell you or get permission from you to step outside that line at some point. But I think this is maybe the biggest moment in education in the state of Tennessee certainly since No Child Left Behind, but maybe in the history of public education.
Yeah.
I would say it's going back to integration of schools. This is the
I was
biggest
just gonna
moment
say,
since then.
integration, segregation.
I agree, and I would like to say that part of the reason it's written this way is to the palatableness to the board that I know there's a lot of differing opinions on. But if asked personally, I would stand over there with Dr. Robertson. It should be noted also, you were talking about putting stronger language, at least to what we were saying. We could add in here specifically to stay at that 200% of poverty level as something that we wanted to note specifically. So.
Well, I really agree with Ms. Black's point about if I've already got a son or daughter in a private school to now all of a sudden I'm gonna take that. I agree with you. That's not okay. I agree with that. But I still think there ought to be a compromise somewhere that I've never been a part of the private school system, but I wanna be. That I ought to be able to use my tax dollars. And I don't know what that would look like. I'm not smart enough to figure that out. But I still believe it's that person's tax dollars and they ought to have some say. That's just my argument.
Mr. Groen?
That's what choice is about.
Dr. Stewart, what are, or maybe Shannon, I'm not sure, excuse me, what are the same three measures that private schools are measured against? Of the five, what are the three equal measurements that private schools and?
I don't think I can answer your question. The only one that comes to mind to me that we probably have similar or something like SAT and ACT scores, right? Which are not, I mean, there's a whole world to SAT and ACT scores, but
Right.
I don't know of any that we share that the state doesn't require any data points that I know of to private schools.
Well, somebody mentioned earlier that we use 3 of 5 of the measurement, that private schools
Do
and
you-
home schools only use 3 of the 5 measurement.
It was discussed in one of our meetings that they were only using, was it like the reading metric, the math metric, and the science, or was it something? Okay,
Not familiar.
I can go back through my notes and have it for us on Thursday.
Okay, I appreciate that. I think I agree with Dr. Robinson on the constitutional requirement more than anything else. Because I don't think the individual liberty versus common good is a valid argument. Because if the kids are being educated in a private school or a public school, and they contribute after they graduate in whatever they do, whether they go to a junior college or a CTE training or to a college or university, that's going to be the common good. So, you know, I would think we need to stick with the constitutional argument and not the individual liberty versus common good, because those kids being educated, and I could argue in a more disciplined environment, are going to contribute just as much to the common good as if they graduated from public schools. And then we could have a whole argument on whether it's going to be better or not. So I think we need to stick to the constitutional requirement instead of the subjective measure of individual liberty versus common good. And, you know, what is the average school tax and the property taxes that an individual pays on, say, a $400,000 home? Maybe $1,800. You know, what percent of that is?
We get about 45% of the property tax, so whatever, I don't know what the millage rate would be on 400,000, but take 45% of that. And
Yeah, so we're still talking, you know, less than $2,000.
yeah.
And so in that regard, you know, we can't argue it that way, because if we wanted to have individual liberty, we would say, well, you turn in paperwork and you don't pay the specific part of your property taxes that goes to education. And that's not $6,800 or $7,000. That's, you know, now if you've got $1 million home or a $2 million home, yeah, you're getting up there. But yeah, it's probably less than $2,000. So, you know, we are asking everyday taxpayers, both at the county level and the federal level, because of all the federal grant monies we get, to pay that extra money. But we're paying into private schools right now through our federal tax dollars.
Yep.
And that money is through this school district to all of those private schools. And we just need to look it up on the budget whenever we get an update on how much of that money goes. So Belvoir Christian Academy, the last time I looked, was getting $75,000 to $80,000 in a title grant. And that comes funneled directly through us. So, and that's just one school. And there are like 42 or 44 private schools now. When I moved here in 2007, there were 24. So this board still has a big job to do. Because the point is, we have to offer a better product. And I know that you've assembled a staff among you that thinks that just being average is okay, but it's not good enough. So we have a lot of work to do. Thank
So
you.
I'd make a couple points. Number one, I don't know anybody on my staff that thinks average is okay publicly.
Well, I didn't say that. I said you've assembled the staff that thinks we
I don't think I've hired
striving to
anybody.
do better.
Yeah, I don't think I hired. I think maybe I'm hearing you wrong or something. But second thing, I think the common good of what you're talking about is not necessarily the end product, but again, back to that constitutional requirement of like, we have to provide a public education. And to your point of I'm sorry to Ms. Black's point, what you fear is going to happen is people are going to walk out that can, right? Or even some that are existing in private schools, and then the ones that are going to be harmed are the ones that are already furthest from opportunity. And so the common good is trying to think about, again, constitutionally, we're required to provide this public school system that, again, part of our values is the foundation of our community. We believe that, again, that's an important component of the common good of this community. I think we go 1,000 different ways with this, and I mean, obviously, we've seen differing opinions. I think your point of why this language is kind of watered down, in my opinion, is probably because I don't know we could get to a place where we 100% agree on it. 11 people.
Agreed. Are you done with your points? I agree completely, and I still think that it's value added enough to have on here in any way that we put it. It has to be discussed, and it cannot. The guardrails cannot be lost to this at all, and that's why it's said this way. And I know that as the legislative representative, much like when as a board chair, you have to be a little bit more helping to move the conversation along than against your own points. But I do want to say two of my own, just me. Larry, you said about the individual good and giving back to the community. I would argue that by awarding the individual good, you pull away from the group whole good. Because every dollar pulled from a public school doesn't just follow that one child and help them. It hurts us being able to build new schools and put roofs on those schools and playgrounds and teachers and food in the cafeteria. So the individual good pulls from the whole. And that's what the Constitution is about, is doing good for the whole. The other thing that I would note, and I've said this before in some public comments, but church schools and private schools are in their nature charitable. So I think that if they're looking for charity to try and help get a kid there, they should do that. I read long ago a statement by the Catholic bishop for the area, and he said, no Catholic child will go without a Catholic education. And so the church as a whole paid for those students to go there. I think that if we're talking about that, that's the area we need to be in. Joe, you do such great work with the kids in a fully charitable thing. I think that instead of taking those dollars away from our public students, if a church wants to do that, then the church should do that and address their funds to children's education instead of taking it again from the whole of the group. Okay, coming back into my role here. Do we, obviously, I heard a little bit about trying to put in that 200% into here. There will be more details that will be rounded up for us, but is there anything in this specific two statements that we want to for sure say, I want that out, I want this in.
Well, I think, excuse me, I
Mr. Brown.
think as Chairman Smith stated, I think we need to be specific. This is very ambiguous, the ability of affluent families. We need to, like we said, advocate.
Okay. We could write that to say, limit the availability to a 200% of poverty level threshold.
I'd even be happy with 2.5, you know, but yeah, I think that there, at some point in time, with inflation the way it is, you know, what, 19-20% over the last 2 years. I mean, $70,000 isn't, if you've got a family of 4, that's rough.
I'm thinking about all the stuff I had to do for a $2 a month allowance when I was a kid.
Yeah, mow that vacant lot, you know. So I think again, I think we need to be a little more specific. And so I'm looking for something that's less ambiguous.
I saw a head nod. I think that Shannon and I are on point with what we could put in there with the 200% and, again, the notes that we've said tonight of.
I think maybe saying something about keeping the current guardrails of the pilot program around public school participation and income requirements. So like you can't already be going to a private school and get vouchers, and you can't, you know, like, so that those requirements stay the same, and the recommendation that those requirements stay the same.
I can live with that.
Yeah,
I can live with that.
I think we need to, I don't really think we can evaluate this program unless we do it, if they keep the same standards for 3 years, maybe even 5. I mean, we've got to be able to measure. I know that's what Shannon's about. We have to be able to measure how effective we're being. Not only just here, but at the state level too. Although, you know, we focus all the time here.
So can that not be our position? I mean, we know where the governor's at, and you got a super majority up there. There's gonna be a voucher program of some kind. Banking.
Yeah, there already is, so.
You know, so can we not say just that? We want the parameters that are in place for the pilot now to continue for a period of time. Could we not say something like that?
Yeah.
You want me to change it to burn it to the ground? I'm just kidding. Okay, yeah, I think that Shannon and I can find a way, Rachel, to get this worded in a way that states what we want to limit. And to Larry's point, I could not agree more with, we need data points, because I think at the end of the day, the data points are going to end up helping my position on this. So I would love to have that information.
Well, so I think to that point, the second point here does need to be maintained, this notion of accountability.
Yeah.
Totally agree. Totally agree with that. And I said that in the beginning. I have no problem with that second paragraph.
Okay.
Sorry.
Don't be sorry. Hey. Oh, yeah.
Private school
No,
stuff.
you're dismissed. Tell him he's got to bring home a win. Okay. Excellent. We are going to move on to number 2 before we take public comment. Okay. Number 2 is the educator licensures and, teacher licensures and educator pipelines. It states, remove the praxis requirement to renew or advance practitioner licenses initially obtained out of state. Decrease praxis scores threshold in high-need content areas, i.e. early childhood, SPED, K-12, ESL, mathematics, 612, and the science, and increase flexibility of licensure to reduce shortages in key endorsements bond by grade bands such as pre-K. Support policies that reimburse educators seeking new licensure. Fully fund add-on endorsements in high-need content areas and audit and streamline endorsement areas to match the local and regional talent pipeline. So I didn't note many. This is pretty straightforward to me. It's been mentioned in our open board meetings that there's a lot of difficulties in our state that aren't in other states for people that may be teaching in Tennessee to move to Georgia, and vice versa is a lot harder. This is basically talking a lot about that, and also I think touches a little bit on our support for the Grow Your Own program that we're doing and support measures there. So with that being said, Shannon, do you want to add anything at all, or do you want me to open it up? Okay, I'll open the floor up. Mr. Grum?
Well, I completely agree with the very first part, because having gotten certified in 4 different states, I've had to take,
Is that fun?
well, every state required me to take, like Oklahoma and Colorado and Texas all require you to take their own individual state histories. And one state might require you to take sociology class, or another state might require you to take a psychology class, and then you have to take a certification test on every single class, every single course you want to teach. So I'll just give you one example. Oklahoma. I got a long-term substitution to finish out most of the semester at a small school. So I was the only social studies teacher, 7 through 12. I had to take every single test for every single course. And then I was dual certified in science, so I had to take every single science course. I had to take 15 different tests. And it was a scam. It was one test for $50 and 3 for $75, but you had to do them all in this 3 in the same day. So like 2.5 hours each test. And you had to go to Oklahoma City, drive to Oklahoma City to do it. So, yeah, I think that we can do a lot, considering that we have, there's so much migration to Tennessee from other states. I think we need to ease those requirements. I knew a teacher in Kansas that had married a military officer, and she had been an English teacher in Germany, a German citizen. And she had to go all the way to the State Board of Education to get certified to teach German. It's like, really? So I think that what I'm concerned about, and what I don't want to ask you about, I should have asked you ahead of time, but did a lot of this focus on the needs in rural communities? Because it's really difficult, because I've done it, to find teachers in real small school districts that might have maybe 1,000 students total K through 12. Or the example I gave you in Oklahoma, we had a school district, we had 206 students K through 12.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, my smallest class was 3 and my biggest class was 19.
So to directly answer your question, these are geared towards Hamilton County. And so, you know, even in Hamilton County, we have a need for teachers. This law, in the way that we're hoping they do it, is obviously something that would be a benefit to the state of Tennessee. As you mentioned, migration, people, especially in places like here in Johnson City and Memphis, where there is such a close grouping of, like in other states, just 5 minutes down the road. We've not gotten some great Georgia teachers because of this licensure situation. So that's where it stands. This document is for Hamilton County, but I do believe that would benefit the state as a whole.
Well, I agree. There were other reasons why Georgia was getting a lot of, siphoning teachers away from us. But anyway, thanks.
Okay.
But I am concerned about, I think we need to be careful not to encouraging a lowering of test scores in terms of the certification to teach something like math and science. I think that would be a mistake. I think we need to maintain those standards.
Every time that this has been discussed, it has been discussed in a manner of making it easier for good teachers that have scored well and to get in and to get licensed, not necessarily the quality of the teacher lowering.
Well, to the math point, one of the standards in the state of Tennessee for high school math is that everybody be calculus certified, but no high school has more than one calculus teacher. So I would contend that you should differentiate and have two different levels
Exactly.
of attainment for licensure. in
And
high
that
school.
falls under the same in science for physics.
That's right.
Great point.
And Mr. Groen brought up something, and Ms. Omar Kill or one of you guys can answer this. The Praxis is an expensive test. I know the last time I had teachers taking it, it was between 350 and 400. And he mentioned that in Oklahoma, they charge 50 or three.
It wasn't for practice.
I know, but for a,
Praxis.
oh, so they had, to do both of those. Oh, well, I guess my question is, does the state receive the money for the Praxis test? Or who?
That's the vendor.
Yeah. it's-
Okay, so that is and who has determined that that's the test that we need to be giving? Because there are other,
That is the state. I think
okay.
the state determines the
Because
test.
Georgia doesn't use Praxis.
Right.
Okay, and that was my question, because that's the number one complaint that I heard from an administrator's point of view when I was getting, not just small rural areas, but small schools to staff certain classes. You had to encourage teachers to get certified in something, and science was one of those, but at $350, $400 a pop, and then they also have to pay $150 for the practice books and stuff. It was, and they were worried that because of the level that the test is, they might not pass it the first time, and then they have to, invest more into that. So I was just curious if there's not a more affordable approach or a different company that's more affordable besides Praxis. So.
Yeah, which I think, it's a TDOE determinant. So I think if we wanted to add that to this, like consider other, pathways towards credentialing in terms of assessment, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I know Georgia's pretty happy with who they
Do you know
have.
who they use?
No, I don't, but I can, Shelley Pritchard, she's the principal at Ringgold Middle School, and she was, at Signal Mountain and Central before that. She was talking about the testing and how it's much easier to get teachers certified there than it is here in Hamilton County. So.
I don't think that's too hard of a, is that palatable to the board members that are here? Okay, so if we could put in some language about consideration of which testing model is utilized.
Is that it?
Yep.
Okay. I think the state's on the right track by allowing the recommendation to allow for military experience and job experience to count towards certifications too. I think that's great, especially in vocational type courses. But, I mean, there's other regular courses too that, social studies, for example, there's certain military people that could probably come in and teach history and social studies as well as anybody, so.
Okay. All right. I think that's all the conversation on that. We've got the notes to add to it. We have 3 more items. I am going to suggest that we take just a 3-minute break, and then come back and let you speak if you'd like. Is it okay to talk in the middle? Okay. Okay. All right. Just a quick little break. Yeah. Okay, I am going to invite Ms. Omarkale to be our public comment. I don't need to use the standard one because today's meeting is only about agenda items, so it should be just fine.
Okay.
The time is 3 minutes,
And
It's already
I'll try to be 3 minutes. One of the things I do agree, I do like what I'm seeing in your legislative agenda. I think the discussion tonight has been very thought-provoking and aligns with a lot of what I've been thinking and what I'm hearing from across the state. I agree with Dr. Robertson too, in looking at the coincidence of 1 and 5 happening so close together. We've been fighting vouchers in this at the state level for years. We've been talking about it at TEA across the country. NEA has been talking about it. So this is hasn't been a new thing. But the fact that they waited, I said this to you guys a couple of months ago, they waited 6 years before they decided to get their criteria together. I think that it is definitely not a conspiracy theorist. I'm looking at facts. If you have paid attention to Channel 5 in Nashville, their investigative reports, he did an investigation, and to me, it's just a case of follow the money. There are groups who are truly trying to kill public education. There are groups who want to get rid of the federal Department of Education. They want to get rid of that. And so those things are all going to destroy and really decrease the validity of our public schools. And I believe in great public schools. I believe in the fact that we pool our money. It's not about the greater good, or I'd be quoting Dr. Spock, and same was from Star Trek. I don't think it's greater good. I think that it's a case of when you put your money in a pot together, you evenly decide where it should go. I don't go to the pastor at my church and say, I want to pull out my amount of tithe and fix my pew and make it a different color. So once you put that money, once that money is in there, we've released our ability to determine it. As a teacher, once I fill out a referral, I've released my ability to have a say in the discipline of that child. So there are some things that it's about you release that money, whether you choose to or not, because it is sales tax and it is federal taxing. And my concern is not, it's about what's happening right now. I like the fact that you're looking at saying, let's really pilot this. Let's not do a one-time thing and then say that was the pilot. Let's really see the data. Let's really look at it so that we know what it is. Because it's going to open up to more is just going to hurt and allow more children to leave. And that's going to leave us with less funds to help the ones who are left. I have 5 seconds. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you. I want to say I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate your continued and always support of our schools and your thoughts. Thank you. Okay. Sorry, this is still me. Okay. So number 3, improving and expanding school safety measures. Due to staffing limitations among local law enforcement agencies, Hamilton County Board of Education requests that the General Assembly expand the state grant funding provided for school safety to allow LEAs to hire school security officers in addition to SROs, school resource officers, to ensure all schools are able to have dedicated full-time security personnel. Hamilton County Board of Education urges the General Assembly not to introduce or pass legislation that would allow any personnel beyond SSOs and SROs to carry firearms on school property. Support policies that prioritize preventative mental health supports for students, such as funding for school counselors, licensed social workers, and clinical mental and behavioral health professionals. That is as it's stated, and I'll just start the ball rolling with kind of a small education lesson on the record. So an SRO is an employee of the Sheriff's Department. They are someone who, one of the main difference between them and an SSO is that they do have the ability to arrest someone, whereas the SSO has the ability to detain. Both of the officers are duly vetted, trained, and are armed individuals. The difference is that the SSO, that is their entire job, is to be at a school. They are also have additional classes and support for dealing with children, students of all ages. And the SRO, it should be noted, is required both in the summertime and if there's any lapse in school time, that they do have to pull standard shifts with the sheriff's office. Just case in point, to put it in perspective, when the schools were shut down periodically for COVID, those resource officers did have to pull shifts at the jail and in standard beats. Sorry, I don't know the direct terminology, but on patrol, I think is the right way to put it. Field work, okay. So I always want to say that out loud because there are, I could think of a handful of schools where there are SSOs who are being replaced with an SRO because of this legislature that don't want to take on the role of being an SRO because of those shifts and because of other things. And any way we can make our schools safer when we're getting a good person is the right method. The second part of the legislation is kind of the scary one, that you want to make sure that if there's someone that is bringing a firearm into the school, that they're the right someone. And in my opinion, and as we're stating here, that is a law enforcement officer, whether that be an SSO or an SRO, or for any reason, that there is a standard, not one of these positions, but an actual officer of the law in our school. And then the third part, to support the policies of mental health, this just takes a step further with what we're already doing in the schools, is recognizing that we can stop a problem before it starts if we have the right means in place and the right ways to truly help our children succeed. So I will, I was going to say I'll open it up, but I see that Ms. Black has lit up.
So I want to make sure that I'm clear, and I want some clarity for the public. SSOs, as we have them in Hamilton County, our school security officers are Hamilton County Department of Education employees, HCS employees, yes. Yep. And SROs are employees of the Sheriff's Department. Do school administrators or you or anyone at central office have any control over who the Sheriff's Office sends to us to be an SRO in our schools?
So let me just clarify one thing. Until this year, it was only Hamilton County Sheriff's officers, but if you guys will
Chattanooga City
remember,
Police.
we've had, Soddy Daisy step up, trying to think off the top of it, East Ridge step up and provide officers as well. So we do have some SROs that aren't just with the Sheriff's Office. We have input on who comes to schools. Robert Sharp works really closely with the Hamilton County Sheriff's Office to talk about placement and where they go. We don't have hiring authority, is what you're asking.
Okay. And so if there is an incident or a complaint or an issue with an SRO, do we have any sort of agreement in writing with our LEAs that says that we have, that we don't have ultimate disciplinary abilities, but we can say this person can't come back?
Well, we have the ability to, yes, talk about if someone's not a good fit, and the Sheriff's Office has been really supportive of that. We have an agreement in place that we worked on extensively with the Sheriff's Office that we've had for a little over a year now. And so there are a lot of things in place to make sure that relationship is positive.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And once an SRO is assigned to a school, do they generally stay there, or is there a lot of rotation around, or are those SROs building the same kind of relationships with the student population that an SSO, who is our employee, and is it only at that school? Or is it
typically they
similar?
stay. I mean, the Sheriff's Office has the same goal that we do in terms of allowing the officers to build, or the deputies to build relationships with kids. So typically they're staying, in place as long as it makes sense.
I just hate to see that, because of the policy at the state, I don't want to lose our good SSOs who are doing a good job, who have relationships with our students, who are invested in the schools that they're at. I don't want, because the state has put this grant program that only applies to law enforcement agency and personnel, I don't want to lose our good employees, because I think, like, from what I've seen since I've been on the board, the SSOs in every single one of the schools in my district are invested in the kids. They're well liked. They're building the relationships that they're supposed to have. The families trust them. And I don't want to lose our good employees because we're having to replace the funding, and it's limited to the employees of a law enforcement agency.
So I think there are two things to consider in what you're saying. Number one, the whole point of this is to
Yeah.
include funding,
Right.
right? The sheriff is supportive of this. I've had multiple conversations with him about this idea. I don't think, and I think he would say the same thing, that they're ever going to get, anytime the next couple of years, get to a point where they have enough SROs or SRDs to cover every single school.
Right.
So we're committed to the kind of hybrid model we've got. The second thing that I would say is, based off that hybrid, is we have always been moving towards an area that we are reducing the number of SSOs that we've had. Like, that's been in the works for, 8 months now. And so we will continue to do that, but no one's losing their job. That'll happen through, natural attrition and just people taking other jobs.
Right. And I do want to say, like, publicly, for the third paragraph, supporting policies that prioritize preventative mental health supports. I'm incredibly proud of what we've done in Hamilton County and the investment that we made in the staffing model and in the hiring process that started this school year. I'm incredibly proud of what we've done in Hamilton County, and I think anything that we can do to kind of like shine a light on what we've done well for the rest of the state and encourage the rest of the state to invest in those types of student supports is incredibly important. Using our power as the fourth largest school district in the state of Tennessee to shine a light on something that we've done well. So, fifth? No, fifth. Okay. Rutherford passed us? Wow.
Mr. Keene?
I wanted to ask one question on the third paragraph about the support staff. Are all schools using the same? So I've had a few ask me questions about that. Are all schools using the same referral process for seed coaches and that, or does each school have its own? Okay, that's what I was wondering. I'll talk to you later about it. Thank you.
Well, like I said, I read through these and I liked the way we were before. Does anyone have anything that they would personally want to change on this? I feel like these hit the nail on the head and they're pretty straightforward.
Yep.
Yes.
Let me ask you, because you looked into this, I believe, and in terms of school lunch, school meals, breakfast and lunch,
Okay.
and the amount of waste that was taking place.
Hold on. Are we?
Wait a minute.
Did we jump? We jumped. We
We're
were.
on number 3. We're on number 3, not number 6.
Oh, okay. Never mind.
Okay. Okay. Well, hearing no changes, we'll roll with that one as is. Moving on to number 4. I'm not, unless you want to skip, Larry. Do you want to go to 6 now? No. Okay. Accepting federal education funding. Hamilton County Board of Education urges that the General Assembly continue to accept federal education funding which predominantly supports students who are living in poverty, have learning or physical disabilities, or are learning English as a second language. There's obviously been a lot of conversation about this. I first heard this proposal at last summer's legislative seminar, and 500 school board members in a room, and it was met with collective groans. It was interesting to see, and Larry, I will say here, at that time, the main example that the Speaker of the House gave was that we throw away a lot of food, and that he wished that we could box that up and give it to people in need. I'm paraphrasing, but that was the general point. There weren't many other points. There was no data at the time. It was just kind of part of the conversation, part of his speech. Going further down this, though, there's a lot of things that have been forgotten about here. When I was in D.C. with COSBA, our National School Board Association, the conversation about this was there's a lot of things that we have to do even if we don't accept federal funding. IDEA is one of those that's on the bottom here in 6. But of those things, we're not looking at what we would lose. Not to mention, I've heard a lot of people also remind us that, and Marco even said it, that's our money. You know, we paid those federal taxes, and we're just not going to take it back to our state and tell them we don't need it. So I think that this one has a lot of holes in it. It was very promising to see superintendents and members of that group that were in the polling, if you will, in the party talking about it, that were almost unanimously saying, I don't understand how this could be feasible. So I think that we are one more echoing voice in that, unless someone has a point that has escaped me. But we'll start by, did you turn your light off?
Yes,
Screen? Okay.
you just said what I was going to
Okay.
say. So.
Ms. Black.
I just think it's important for the public to understand what it means to leave these federal dollars on the table. Because I know that to some folks there's a distrust with the federal government, and they think that, like, if we don't take the money, then we don't have to listen to them. But when the federal money that we get as a school district is targeted towards, like, students who live in poverty. Those Title I dollars can help hire extra staff. It's the money is targeted towards providing services for students with disabilities. Yeah, Mr. Perez, I mean, it's our money. Why would we leave it on the table? But also, why would we abandon the dollars that are targeted towards the most at-risk students that we have in our population? Why would we do that? So I think everybody needs to understand what it would mean to say that we were going to reject federal dollars, and what it would mean for the students in Hamilton County, for our neighbors, for our own kids, to say that we weren't going to take this money, because it's going to hurt the kids who are already the most vulnerable.
Now I do have something.
Mr. Keene?
So I will add to that. So it's $1.8 billion that they're talking about. And the argument by the two that proposed this bill was that the money is there in the rainy day fund. And my question is, why don't we, or my comment is, why don't we continue to accept the federal money and turn around and use that $1.8 billion for other things such as building new schools or providing a higher salary for our teachers, or there's a wide range of things that money can be used for. If it's just sitting there and it's, they're worried about it and need to have it used, we can use it. But again, at TSBA, it was unanimous, I believe, that every system there said we take the money.
Just the only last point I would add is that when I was at COSBA, and I've said this to this group again, is that these dollars don't just help the children that are in need. They go to a school with a group of other children. It helps everyone at a baseline. So, all right, if there's no other comments, I like the language of this, and I'm comfortable just putting it before the board.
Yep.
Excellent. Okay, so number 6 is the last one. I don't want to call it a catch-all at all, but it's supporting strategies proven to impact student success, which can be a wide range, but we've got these 3 things identified. Increase sustainable funding for K-12 school-based personnel, particularly to booster strategies previously funded through state grants, such as RT-12, high dosage, I'm sorry. That's funny. RTI2, high dosage, low ratio tutoring, and career and technical education. I was the one that used to count forward to see how many times before I had to read in class. I can talk all I want, I can't read out loud. Support state-level funding for strategies that strengthen public education outcomes, particularly early childhood learning, full-service community schools, school-based health clinics, expanded broadband access, and universal free school meals. Advocate for federal-level legislators to increase the funding per pupil spent on students served by the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, no 12, and to amend the IDEA to better support schools and parents in their ability to collaborate to meet the educational needs of individual children. Honestly, so my notes for me are pretty broad too, but we've got a strong push for CTE in our first note, and that is something that we are getting support from the city of Chattanooga, and there is talks that there may be some coming from the state already. So I think that continues to advocate and talk about things that we need. The broadband is not as terrible in Hamilton County. We have a great partnership with EPB, but this is something that we can be a leader and a flagpole holder of saying, look at what we're doing with this. The state of Tennessee deserves to have these same ideas. This is something that I have sat in our senator's office asking about. So it's an important thing, and not to mention, we've all been invited to the No Kid Hungry breakfast and talking about how much better our students, not just in grade levels, but in behavior issues, which we talk about every single meeting, behavior issues with our students. If they have a full belly, those go down. So it's just something that is absolutely would be a wonderful asset for us to better our community and better our student outcomes with those. And then back to IDEA and back to advocacy at the federal level to our senators and representatives when I was in D.C. We funded this so much better during the pandemic. It was part of everything that we focused on, and the outcomes are statistically provable, very much so. The talk about it is with IDEA, it has historically been underfunded, but the best that it has ever provided and proved was at 40% funding, which is the most it's ever gotten to. We are currently funding IDEA at 40% of 40%. So less than 40% of 40%. I believe it was around 12 to 13%. So just these are the dollars I was talking about that specifically help the school first and then the students in need. It's not meant to be looked at as something that is simply helping a child just in need. It helps that child's class, then it helps that child's grade, then it helps that child's school, then it helps our system. So I will open the floor to discussion from there. I think we hit this one out of the park.
Play devil's advocate for a second. The food that's being wasted, Larry, because we accept federal dollars, we're required to have them throw that away, and we cannot donate that to other organizations and stuff, so.
I will say though that there's some great innovative practices happening in some schools where kids are allowed to take things off their lunch tray, put it in a refrigerator, and anybody can come by and get it. And we're seeing that expanding, and it's really great. So less waste.
I know that we are all in our schools often, but apparently one of the favorite things for them to ask me to do is lunchroom duty, and it's the sweetest. You guys get to actually educate, and I watch them at lunch, but that's one of the sweetest things I've ever seen is the sharing fridge and seeing a little kid's eyes light up when a bag of apples goes in there or something else. It's both, it's wonderful and it's gonna make me cry. It's just really sweet, really. Okay, well, I guess I will take over then, Beck. So unless someone has a suggestion of any change of language or any other notes that they want to make sure are put into the extended, then I think we're good to go there. I would invite you all to read the letter. So this letter I composed, but I wrote it, again, trying to think of the board as a whole. And I wrote it in an attempt to further state what we are doing here. Do you all feel like it's necessary for me to read the entire letter? Or
No.
Okay. Then if the board members I would invite you all to read this letter, and if there's anything that you wish changed, try to get to me before the meeting so that I can bring it up in the meeting. Again, I tried to paint with a broad brush, but stick to the topics at hand. It is noted at the bottom that it was composed by myself, but it is invited at the bottom as well to have all 11 of us sign the document to go on to the state. And I truly hope that we can do that as a unified board, especially after this meeting and in the spirit of working together for the betterment of the students of Hamilton County and the state of Tennessee. Yes, sir.
I have a suggestion, and maybe Dr. Stewart or Dr. Robinson can help. Just brainstorming. Wouldn't it be great to have some former students who benefited from some of the programs that we talk about on this side, but we don't talk about on this side, getting some feedback from students that have gone through these programs, be it CTE or Project Inspire or,
I love that idea, and I have a different application for it that I think would be even better. So we've discussed having a sheet of paper, like we've got this that will be turned into them, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 will have notes that we've discussed here and our concerns as we went to drill down further. I think on those sheets we absolutely could have a testimonial or two from a child that has benefited from it or is currently in the program. I don't know that we can have that by Thursday, but if we approve this on Thursday, then we can add the notes that we've discussed to further and testimonials before January 9th when the Tennessee General Assembly comes into session.
yeah, and one year we sent out a survey to all students who had graduated from our high school in the last 4 years. So if they were going to college, it'd be in like their senior year. And one year we got 45% response. And for the teaching staff, when we came back to school that year, for our in-service before school started, that was eye-opening to look at that survey and the number that responded. We had never had more than like 22% response because it was done like every 4 years. But this was, it was really interesting. So
Definitely would be an opt-in survey. No, I will let you take helm on that. I would love to have testimonials of kids that are in the program or benefiting from it. And again, I'm not putting that pressure on us to have that by Thursday, but that's a great addition.
Well, I just talked to a young man today who is in the mechatronics program and is already looped in to Volkswagen. So,
That's awesome.
great young man in JROTC.
That's awesome. I did have a note here to ask if anyone had any additional items that were not previously submitted that they wanted to put in for consideration of any type. Yeah. And then, okay, so the last thing is, with the notes that we have talked about in this meeting, does this body approve to send this to the full body for a vote on Thursday? Okay, hearing none opposed, that motion passes. And with that, we adjourn the meeting.